Night.
Pastor Paul Begley, I am here.
That is good. So glad to have you, my brother. Great to have you on the line tonight.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
Mike, you said a couple weeks ago, you said, you know what, the next time we get together, we might be talking about Australia. Well, we would like to ask you a question about Australia, and maybe this isn't what you're referring to, but the heat wave down there is, they're now saying is going to last till the end of December, and it's the driest that Australia has ever been. They have more brush fires now than ever in history, and there's no rain in sight. I'm just wondering also, is the magma rising? Is that part of the deal? But anyway, Mike, what do you want to say about Australia?
Well, you know, Australia ties in that plate line where it sits. Last time we were talking about the magma, the ground temperatures increasing in Australia. Ground temperatures increase not only on the landmass of Australia, but also out there in the ocean portions. But we have a plate destabilization, or let's just say a plate pressure event happening near Australia. So they're going to continue to feel heat, lots of heat. They're going to have a heat problem, but they're also going to have a lot of volcanic activity. As you can remember, a magma issue starting out in the ocean. So remember, I said don't be surprised if you hear of volcanic steam vents opening up in the ocean. They're going to be all out in that area. There is a massive amount of pressure in that region going all the way up to Japan. Australia, unfortunately, sits in a spot where you have a lot of plate fractures that meet. And that magma, the increased heat of magma temperatures are rising, causing it to be much more fluid, flowing into many more places than usual, and it will find its way to the surface. So we have a swelling event, an ongoing swelling event, which should be, in fact, they've been having a lot of pressure, and I've been watching Australia for the last 4 days intently, looking for some type of pressure release, because some of the pressure readings that are coming back off those lines are just enormous. They're enormous. So we did have a volcanic eruption, but that's still not enough to relieve that amount of pressure.
So we had a volcanic eruption. Was that in the ocean off the coast of Australia or right on Australia itself?
Well, that's Kokopo.
Yes.
I'm saying that right. And Kokopo is sitting right in those fractured lines, right off, well, I'll say off those fractured lines.
Okay.
It certainly is one of the pressure points, but just one. There's still a massive amount of pressure building. That volcano, if it erupted in an extremely large-scale eruption, it still wouldn't be enough to relieve what's happening there. Because they're having pretty soon Australia will have a landmass upthrust, meaning that whole landmass will begin to go up in altitude. And now, that may only be a few inches, but you spread that over the region, it's a pretty big area to have an upthrust in. This is happening all over the world, by the way.
Oh, what about also, as you're talking about this, the land masses are rising. We've seen the dome rise quite a bit at Yellowstone over the last couple of years. We just had a massive volcano eruption today in Papua New Guinea, Mount Uluwatu. That's already a big mountain anyway. It's just enormous. 13,000 people have had to evacuate, 1,000 fleeing for their lives. Homes have been destroyed. Is this just all part of the pressure building and the magma rising in the core of the earth?
It is. All that sits within the region that is unfortunately connected to Australia in a very not so good way. And so just expect more events to open up in that area, more activity in that area, I'll say. That area and the opposite of that plate also, which puts it near our coast in Florida. They should experience in Florida some new activity in the southern regions off that coast that they'll probably say, a brand new discovered volcano or something like that, but it indicates activity when you see this. But the time is becoming quite critical, because once it reaches a certain point, a certain buildup in heat, then you have multiple fractures all over the earth, right? That's not going to be good. It more than likely it's going to build up, but we're still facing some type of event that will displace water on a large scale.
Mike, would you say that as the heat wave that Australia has been experiencing, but here in America, this has got to be one of the hottest Septembers. I've never seen a September this hot. I mean, I was in Gatlinburg last week. It was 96 degrees. I went down there thinking that I was going to see the trees turning color, and I was looking forward to maybe throwing a log on the fire, up high in the mountains there in the Smokies. Instead, I'm sweating bullets. We go all the way to Maryland, and when I get to Maryland, I find out that, hey, it was 96 degrees, 94 degrees. October 1st, it was 92 degrees. What's going on, Mike?
Well, first of all, this is the hottest year ever on record. Hottest year since they have been recording temperatures. Hottest year on record. And if you utilize that data in conjunction with what the sun is doing, we no doubt are undergoing some massive changes. The onset of massive changes.
I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
We're facing the onset of massive changes. If you notice, however, these changes are building, but they're not backing off. In other words, it's one thing to have a hot season that goes away, but worldwide hot temperatures like this, worldwide dry temperatures like this, still we face the droughts in certain areas. Areas in the temperate forest on the East Coast are now under it's more than a moderate drought. Things are dying. Lakes are drying up on the East Coast in lots of different counties. This information, anybody can track that information. Most of the water companies, some of your smaller water companies that filter water out, and they have these plants that filter water. They're shutting down for a while because the radiation. Or heat, I'll say heat. The heat is overwhelming the water processes, the natural water processes. So even the storms that we're having, after it floods and after it rains, it dries up so quick. I mean, incredibly quick. So you have an area flooded that you would think would replenish the water. Not so. It's drying up so incredibly quick. It's just it's a very different time that we live in.
So, Mike, I know the magma's rising, and that's due to the charged particles that are coming and falling, the radiation that's coming from the space, and it's our magnetosphere's grabbing it. You've told us this many times, taught us how then it sends it right to the core of the earth. That's heating the core of the earth. That's heating the magma's rising, and that's certainly drying out the ground, taking out the permafrost, causing the big ice sheet to break off down in Antarctica this week. It's not from cows or it's not from exhaust fumes, really. I mean, we're talking about a planet that's starting to burn. I mean, Mike, is the radiation, though, also heating up the atmosphere and the temperatures on the surface of the Earth?
Sure it is. All that energy pulled in by the magnetosphere, once it redirects it, is beginning to overpower, right? It's so much coming in that, in fact, you can model, with the radiation coming in, you can model the flow of high-speed particles, and you can see in undoubtable, this is just an overwhelming amount of radiation coming into the earth, so much so that all the natural processes of the earth have been supercharged. They've been supercharged. Now, this means that the density of our upper atmosphere is increasing. When the density increases, it's going to cause greater pressures to be felt on the interior portions where we, occupy, right here at the surface. Well, that greater density creates stronger winds, right? The water and the winds are increasing in their velocity. Wind speeds are starting to inch up every single storm that's being experienced. You're having higher and higher wind speeds. You remember the time I told you that we're living in a time where we're going to face 125 mile-an-hour winds produced from an average storm.
What? I remember, but what?
Yeah, storms would be something. If anybody, in the near future, when somebody says they forecast a thunderstorm, it's going to cause great fear. Not necessarily a hurricane, but just a thunderstorm. It's going to cause high fear. We know that the infrastructure cannot take wind speeds that way. So, Pastor Paul, understand this: that as the wind speeds increase, and they're sporadic right now, but they are overall, as they increase and damage the infrastructure, it's going to start to break down how we function in our day-to-day lives. that's when people are going to feel the crunch of what's going on, because these phenomena are not going away. They're increasing methodically, very slowly, but very steadily. They're increasing. And in fact, if you look at some of the data, if you look at the data every 10 years, it's been increasing exponentially, which means every 2 years, we have, 5-6 times the amount of winds and radiation and everything else coming in. So something, now if you look at this from a modeling aspect, some external force is approaching Earth faster and faster. This is solar system wide. This is not just Earth having global warming. I don't like that term global warming, because it's solar system wide. It's for everything in our solar system, everything the sun affects. Even the asteroid belts are now being disrupted. Yes. A recent report came out that they'll likely release next month. Is being affected. There's a lot of ice melt happening in the in some of the asteroid belts, right? So, these things are really happening. Unfortunately, most folks, once they see the evidence, they're going to feel the pain of it also.
Mike, this is Mike from Around the World with us tonight. Mike from Around the World. We've had him. Of course, most people now know who he is around the world. No, they don't. Nobody knows who he is around the world except me. And but they know his voice now. Okay, how's that? And they know that his 6 years coming on this show, telling us what's coming and that it happens is remarkable. And why? Because, he's getting out ahead of us a little bit with some of the information. Mike, let me say this. Are we going to return to the Dust Bowls? Did you say something outside our solar system is approaching that's causing this?
Well, some external force other than our solar system is, it's whatever force that is. It's increasing every 2 years. That force is increasing.
Okay, I'll go with Planet X, Nibiru, or whatever. To your point, we know something's happening. And let me ask you a question: Are we going to these high winds and higher temperatures? Are we going to return to the Dust Bowls? Is our crops going to start? Is there going to be more droughts? Is there going to be more high, dust? I mean, Mike.
Yes, it was about 6 years ago. One of the statements I said about we're going to have flooding and droughts at the same time, and that we just can't handle that. Plant life can't handle that. Nothing can handle that, and this is going to continue to increase. So yes, it's going to affect food. Even this year, some of the national granaries have been emptied out. Overseas, they're having an issue with that. These trade. Some of the background trade that each country does with one another regarding food is extremely critical, because they have to balance the food for the entire world now. It's not just nation to nation. There's a world problem. Due to the changes in temperatures, the crops have not yielded what they normally yield, and people are still hungry as the birth rate has increased. Right, it's more mouths to feed, but it's not sustainable. So, in fact, everything is starting to go backwards, starting to take a toll. This is only going to compound itself every single, each day we go forward. Things are being consumed, things are not being replenished. Even the oil, there's an issue with the oil. The oil, they're pumping oil, but some of the estimates that they used to have 5 years ago, those estimates are gone. Something, heat, and again, when magma starts getting on the move, it starts changing temperatures. It will open up new tunneling systems in the earth.
And the
high pressures build in various places. And so where you could find natural gas one day may not be there a month later.
Wow.
You can find oil one day may not be there a month later. So we have those issues also.
Okay, now, folks, let me just say something, Mike. As magma rises, it creates these hollow places in the earth and fissures. Oil starts going down. Water starts going down from the aqueducts. And that oil that goes down is going to end up creating fuel for the magma in the core of the earth to burn. It's only going to increase the temperatures. Folks, this is not a Green New Deal we're talking about here. This is 2 Peter chapter 3 we're dealing with here, where the earth is going to melt with a fervent heat. This is prophesied in the Bible. And so what Mike has explained to you is prophetically already been told us 2,000 years ago, either through Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, or the book of Revelation and Revelation 8, or even the Apostle Peter in 2 Peter 3, or Isaiah's apocalypse in Isaiah 24. We can go on forever. It's all over the place. Mike, let me ask you a question. New Madrid. There's swarms. There's been 9 earthquakes in the last 7 days. New Madrid. Also Texas, also Oklahoma, also San Francisco, and I'm always worried about Cascadia. But what about New Madrid, Mike? What's going on?
Well, New Madrid is active because it's going to expose some of the other fault lines, like the one that goes right in the middle of New York. There's a fault line in the middle of New York that's not spoken about at all. There's one that runs down all the way through Ohio, parts of Pennsylvania, all the way down to Virginia, North Carolina. Nobody's speaking about that. The New Madrid is on a portion of that unstable plate, and there's a lot of magma underneath the East Coast. A lot of magma. I know that people look at Yellowstone and see they only have evidence of Yellowstone because people talk about Yellowstone. But I have to remind people, it is scientists who put out public information. They're putting out the numbers of how big that caldera is. They're putting out the numbers of how deep the magma is. Nobody has personally gone down there or had their own private equipment to investigate this, right? To confirm this. So while they're focusing on Yellowstone, we've got a problem on the East Coast. Now, they snuck some information out last year. They said, well, you know, we found a huge, they said a large and enormous amount of magma underneath New York that would take, what they say, 2 million years for it to ever reach the surface. And then the story went away. That was a comment to satisfy something, or certainly a message, but they put it out, right? Somebody who is, anybody who's scraping the news and they hear an off story like that just goes away, no other information about it, it should make one nervous. You know, it's not gonna, but we're so gullible. Passball, for example, while everybody's looking at Yellowstone to erupt, right? How many other volcanoes have erupted and killed people? Right? Think about that.
Right.
Everybody's focused on Yellowstone. Yes, it has activity. Sooner or later, Yellowstone is going to have higher amounts of activity. But how many other volcanoes have erupted? And while everybody's looking at these known volcanoes, how many unknown volcanoes have erupted? Right? Everything that's been told to people by science has been turned over. Well, this volcano won't erupt because it's empty, it's too old, it's ancient. All of a sudden, what do they say? An ancient volcano erupted. You know, with these news stories, but sometimes we're so trained to look in areas that are spoken about the most because of popularity and you know, it's a group type thing that we miss what's really going to affect us, and we can ill afford to continue to do that. But on the East Coast, there's a real problem there. That's where most of the gas mains, most of the oil mains are right there. If the New Madrid goes, one of my issues is not so much the earthquake. No, it's not the problem. The problem would be what is actually beginning to damage the Mississippi, what is actually beginning to cause some other sinkholes that have formed that are not salt mines. There are some sinkholes, or let's just say some potential sinkholes that will be city-sized soon enough, because we have an evacuation of some high-pressured liquids that were once there. They're gone now. They're shifting all over the place. Right? Remember all the rumbles and everything people used to hear, and they came up with all these ideas, right? There was a time when some took a computer, all the assets from a computer, to do some modeling of natural ground phenomena, right? It will cause echoes in the air. It's going to cause echoes in the air. In fact, it will cause disturbances inside of the earth. Right? Save for some external objects that are out there, they will cause a trumpeting sound. That means things inside the earth are cracking, but you don't feel it on the surface because it's so deep. But the vibrations certainly start to echo and vibrate all the way up through the earth to the clouds. That's not saying that all the noises are caused from that, but we have a lot of activity in the earth, lots of activity, and it's deeper than where they're fracking. Right, so we can't blame that all on fracking,
right,
because it's happening in places where there's absolutely no fracking.
Right.
But something is shifting, moving, expanding under the earth. Now, another thing is, It is theorized what the interiors of the Earth look like. I would advise people to keep that as a theory. That's not fact. The truth is, no one knows, unless they've been down there, what the inside of the Earth looks like. And all too often, if we believe a theory, taking that as fact, well, that's when we get ourselves upset and oppressed when it turns out to be something different than that. We have to keep in mind the spiritual component to things, biblical histories of things. There are things bound in the interior portions of the earth. People may not know how, but they're bound there. And we all know that sooner or later, what's inside the earth will come topside. Period. Whatever that may entail is coming topside, whether that be magma, whether that be superheated water, which is another issue we'll talk about another week, because there's an ocean that will burst its way to the surface, and it's superheated. It can't evaporate because it's surrounded by rock and other materials, but it's superheated.
Well, Mike, it's amazing what you're telling us, and there's no doubt, folks, the Earth is coming under severe pressure as this binary system, whether you call it Nibiru or Planet X or Planet Number 9 or the Goblin or a dwarf star or wormwood, or, there's a lot of things. We've talked about this plenty of times. We know, and the debris field that's coming. And, I did some studying, Mike. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I asked you the question. I said, which is coming first, Mike? Should we worry about Apophis on Friday the 13th, 2029? Or the debris field that's apparently coming sometime in around 2023, 2025, somewhere in that neighborhood. Your answer was, don't worry about Apophis, you got bigger problems. It's coming first. And I actually went in the Bible and read, and it absolutely tells us that fireballs will fall from heaven, and thunderbolts, lightning, and great hail, and storms. And the trees will burn up, and the grass will burn up. All of this before the two deep impacts. And it even talks about fireballs, brimstone. It's as if it was explaining the debris field. And can you elaborate on that a little bit? Now, and I've got some questions about Russia and Iran I want to ask also.
Sure. In fact, if a secondary system, and I keep saying if, guys, I want to say something else, but I'll go ahead and say it for the sake of conversation. But
okay,
if another system is coming in here, Earth is going to the whole solar system will begin to heat up, destabilize, become very active. If that should happen, sure, lots of debris will come, but something's going to dislodge the asteroid belts, right? And Jupiter, being of a great gravitational force in our solar system, is going to change its orbit. Right? Now,
wow.
This may sound strange, right?
Wow.
But it is common knowledge of the gravitational pull of Jupiter, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the greater gravitational pulls in our solar system that is
but
something
you're
else
saying,
external.
Okay, but now we know that there's what's called the Anderson, between Jupiter and the sun, there's a point there which creates a balance, okay? The gravitational pull of Jupiter and the gravitational pull of the sun. I forgot what that thing's called, the Barry Anderson or something. But you're saying something else bigger is now putting a gravitational pressure on Jupiter, which is going to knock it off its course. Is that right?
That's right. If you take a balanced system, right, that is balanced by way of gravitational pull and inertia, right? Much like an electronic gyroscope, the principles of electronic gyroscope in spacecraft work. If you introduce an external force of that same, let's call it mass, which would be the product of that gravitational pull and inertia, if you introduce something larger that has an effect on the sun, it will surely affect some of the secondary larger objects. Smaller objects, no big deal. The larger objects, a big deal. If Jupiter changes just a hair, that throws the entire protective layer around the inner solar system off. We're going to have a problem with the asteroid belt. One of my concern I have is this. I know that everybody waits on a larger debris field to come into Earth, but I'm going to give you a different way of thinking.
Okay.
Suppose before that larger debris field ever comes into our solar system, that our own asteroid belts are destabilized, and then we have to face the debris that's been there for a long time. See, what we fail to understand is that there are killers inside of our solar system. It only takes a consistent gravitational force for just a minute amount of time, given celestial mechanics, to disrupt that. And then we have a real problem on this Earth, something that is reported as happening for a long time. Due to the material makeup, which they have collected, and they normally keep that secret, I can go ahead and tell you that some of that debris is identified as some of the same debris coming from that asteroid belt. So there's a whole different set of mathematical problems that are not being considered here. It's much like happenings on the Earth. Okay, I'm going to give you an example how that we can focus on the big problems and forget about the small ones. The Earth is undergoing some temperature changes, right?
Right.
Undergoing some temperature changes.
Right.
Okay. All right. Now these temperature changes seem insignificant. Here's what very few people are considering that's going to take a toll on them. Due to temperature changes, that creates an environment for insects we're not used to, poisonous insects we're not immune to, we're not used to. That creates an environment for insects and bacteria and things, but specifically insects. Specifically large spiders, okay? Very large spiders that are now traveling. They travel by waves. Normally, they're kept in the southern hemisphere due to the flow of the currents via jet stream and so forth. But now they're coming far north. These things are highly venomous, and people are dying from bites from these things.
What?
The problem that we're having is they're going all the way up to Ohio now.
No!
Float into Ohio. But they carry with them a type of ecosystem. You don't see these spiders alone. You also have rodents that track the spiders, which are also coming up to the landmass, and they carry disease we're not used to. So what we have are brand new types of sicknesses that are killing people every single day. We're having infestations of things, and there's a type of mold and mildew that the northern hemisphere is not exposed to. So we're going to have a mildew problem also, something that is much more resilient to bleach and things of that nature. So with these small things happening, right, these aggravations that will penetrate, it's kind of like if anybody lives in Germany, they know about wheat bugs. You can seal your home up, you can put your home in a vacuum, wheat bugs are still going to be found in your microwave, in your television set, in your remote control, in your refrigerator, in everywhere, right? So the same thing is happening to the U.S. now, specifically by way of insects and rodents. They will multiply, they will cause sickness, they're going to create paranoia. That will begin to wear people down mentally. And then mentally, our social structure is going to take a hit. So that means before any external conditions actually build up to the point where they really begin to damage everything, we're going to be changed internally, mentally, by all these new things that we're dealing with.
I'm so exhausted. It sounds like Matthew 24. Plagues and locusts and spiders and shortages and famine and water and contaminations and mold and bacteria and Ebola. All right, Mike, let's ask a question. Planet X is going to shake things up, guys. The heavens are going to shake. The earth's going to quake. Mike, let's go to the Middle East for a moment. I want to thank all 2,222 of you who are with us tonight live on our backup channel. It's great to see you guys all here, find your way. Mike, there's a lot going on, but there's a couple things. There's chaos in Iraq. They're trying, the Shiite Muslims are trying to overtake the government there after all that war, after all of that infrastructure that we spent, all those lives we lost. But then the Russians are in Syria, and they announced and they're training with the Iranians. And we're talking, these are special ops. They're doing a exercise, Russia, Iran, and Syria, where they're using tanks, armored vehicles, killer drones, warplanes over by the Euphrates River. This is right out of the pages of the Bible. I mean, these are the very countries that are going to be involved in eventually attacking Israel. And they're in the Euphrates area, which is the Bible says is where these angels are going to be released to bring terror upon the earth, these four winds from the Euphrates. I mean, Mike, can you tell me what's going on with Russia? I mean, and Iran, are they preparing to literally go to war with Israel?
Well, at least now you know why I say that. If when you're talking about Iran, you're talking about Russia. When you're talking about Russia, you're also speaking about Iran, because they are very intertwined and tight, and they're good friends tactically, right? But what they're facing is a breakdown in our foreign relations, and foreign policy breakdowns have happened so extreme. They're so extreme because we internally, the USA, we can't trust one another inside of leadership anymore. So we have a trust issue inside of leadership, and most people are starting to bounce that word around called treason. When it reaches that level of disdain, then we have a problem, a real problem in the leadership. That goes for everything. Now, the foreign countries are going to take this for granted. They're going to take advantage of our division, and they're going to start setting up everything that they can set up. And just so people know, I don't really think people have a good outlook on the Iranian forces at all. I really don't. Iranian forces outnumber U.S. forces by a huge margin, and I think people ought to be aware of that. And this Salami guy, right? So this guy manages 18 fronts at the same time every single day. So he's not an idiot. This guy is extremely intelligent. He's a masterful tactician, and he's very aggressive in his tactics. He does not play. If someone were to, in the absence of orders, he would act, is what I'm saying. So they have an issue right now to keep this guy chained up. He's chained up right now, right? And they have a hard time chaining him up. One day they're not going to be able to chain him up, which is why you're going to hear about a lot of assassination attempts on this guy's life, because they know how aggressive he really is. But nobody can get to him. Once he seized that position, it's very difficult to get this guy out. For America, we become a bit too lax, right? We're a bit too confident. We're not hungry enough anymore, and so we're not vigilant like we used to be. All the while, Russia is very hungry. Their Air Force outnumbers China. It outnumbers China, the U.S. put together. Do you know that? Their Air Force does. And when we talk about equipment, I know that people brag about equipment. Now, we have things that we're just not going to pull out of the inventory for. A war wouldn't do that, right? A war just wouldn't do that. There's technology, yes. But as far as the amount of equipment that we have, we're just not there yet. We're too laxed. We're too laxed.
Well, what happened? I mean, wait a minute. What happened, Mike? I mean, during the Bush era and during the Obama era, weren't we building up our military, or were we depleting it?
Well,
and you don't have to answer. You don't have to.
At the ground level, Pastor Paul, when immorality strikes a nation, right? You have to think about something. People who lived 4 generations ago, they were very robust. They were hard workers. Right?
Right.
Look at the kids today. Are they hard workers?
No.
No, they're not. And so that hard work translates, right, into a good soldier, or a soldier who was certainly under fire can continue to perform his duties and
yeah, but wait. We're not talking about the soldiers and their heart to fight. We're talking about the number of planes and tanks and capability.
They grew up and they turned into the leadership. Your leadership right now, that they're 27 years old. They're making big decisions. They're calling big shots, right? Intelligence right now, how smart a person is can place a person in a position he or she should not be in. And so what they're doing is making bad decisions. They're saying, we don't need this, we don't need that, we don't need that. For some reason, they think many things are like simulations or close to video games. They have forgotten the sting of not being prepared. They have forgotten what it is to you have to remain vigilant because you'll be caught off guard. They have forgotten the pain of the sword itself. And so with this generation who is now in their 30s and 40s, right, and they're in leadership, they're just not pressing the issue. They don't see the importance of having a robust military like that, which is why they constantly have to fight for funding. There's no way in the world the president of the United States would have to advocate for funding for the military. The military should be doing that. They should be the ones saying, hey, we need this, we need that, we need that, and then go ahead and make the proper proposals. But with division, you also have a type of disdain and disgust. And when that happens, if it stagnates over the years, then you have a weakened system. And so other countries are taking advantage of that weakened state of operation that we're in right now. Now, can we really do some damage to everybody? Of course we can. Are we placed all over the world? Yes, we are. But we have gotten behind in production of our equipment. We don't have enough equipment. If something were to break out, if we lose any type of tactical advantage or element of surprise, where we have to take actual hits on our equipment, well, everything is up in the air. And we know this one fact. It's in the Bible that Jerusalem is going to be occupied for 3.5 years. Nobody can occupy Jerusalem so long as America is standing. So what in the world has happened to us during those times?
Well, right? I think
something is that's a big that's one of those larger statements that's very small.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, I really do. I mean, what a great explanation of why we have lost our way in a lot of ways. And it starts really, look at our Congress. I mean, it's a joke. They literally disdain, some of them, they disdain the military. They won't even stand for the flag. We got people in Congress right now who hate America. I could say that very easily. Their actions, and the deep state has become dangerous, and a dangerous state. And the president seems to have, he's got snakes crawling all around, and not just him. There's some good congressmen and good senators that are in there, as you know, and there's some really good, strong military men in there, but their hands are tied. There's this division that's so deep now. Like you said, when they start using the word treason, you should be thrown in solitary confinement. This guy needs to be arrested. And it's coming from both sides now at each other. This country's in a dangerous position right now, isn't it, Mike?
It really is. It really is. It's just like democracy. That word does not mean, what I define democracy as being. It's not that definition today. What I define patriotism as being is not that, we used to fight for one another. Now we fight each other. And a country, if we're divided against ourselves, the Bible says it shall not stand. It's a decree against anybody who is divided like that. We're certainly divided. That's why I keep saying that Christians are the last line of defense.
Amen.
Nobody else, there is no defense nowhere else except us.
Amen, Mike. Amen. And church, Mike is right. And he's so right on this. We are the last line of defense. Our prayer warriors, every one of you, we've got to continue to hold the line. We've got to stand at our battle stations. We've got to stay alert. We got to watch and pray. And because we're really living in a dangerous times, as the Bible said it would be. Perilous times or dangerous times will come in the last days. And so, wow. Mike, let's ask you another question. What about, we've heard about Russia. I like your basically saying Russia and Iran are pretty well joined at the hip. They've got very strong interests. The Bible tells us what they will eventually do. What is look at the EU. This is a collapse. What about Iraq? That thing's collapsing. Nobody even takes Iraq serious no more. Everybody flies through their airspace like it's water. The Middle East is kind of a time bomb. Saudi Arabia won't even fight their own wars. They're looking for somebody else to fight for them. This is getting dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and unfortunately for Saudi Arabia, I stick firm to the belief they will not be on the map. Saudi Arabia will be totally removed. They will be. They'll be in utter ruin.
And you're not the first person to say that. Avi Lipkin's been saying that for about 5 years. You just confirmed something. I even just spoke to another guy, Agent RC, who's basically saying the same thing. He told me yesterday, he said, Paul, the house of Saud is going to fall. They can't even get people to fight for their own country. They hire mercenaries from other nations to fight. That's why the Houthis are kicking them around. You've made a bold statement tonight by saying they will fall and not exist. This is getting crazy.
Yeah, they unfortunately for them, they won't. They're more like a Middle Eastern. They are somewhat like it's a sad situation. It really is, especially since we depend upon them so much. If you start looking at some of the numbers, we really do depend upon Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is just not going to be Saudi Arabia soon. And once it's out of the way by force, because it will be removed, that's when Iraq plays its role in some of the cloak and dagger that will take place in the Middle East. What you have right now is placement and maneuvering. That's what you have right now. And given the forced movements that are happening all over the face of the earth, and Russia and positioning itself in every single place you can. China, if you watch China, and they don't report everything they do, but sometimes you can follow some of the activity that takes place in the Pacific over some of the no-fly zones. But China is maneuvering every single day at breakneck pace. Now, why are they doing that? They never had this type positioning before. Neither have we countered their positions with this ferocity before. So there's something going on behind everyday statements that really has everybody seething right now.
It's
I
more.
think that people understand that we have a life. We truly are in a struggle right now, and it is going to cost lives with the wrong decision. One wrong decision, and many lives are going to be lost very quickly.
It's not just a trade war, is it, Mike? It's a war of survival, and it's on between us and China, and it sounds like to me that Saudi Arabia, in your opinion, is going to go down, and it sounds like Iran will team up with Iraq, the Shiite Muslims that are in Iraq, along with the Russians, and maybe even Turkey will get involved, I don't know, to take down the House Assad. And that's part of the collapse of the Middle East, which will create these nations surrounding Israel at some point.
Yeah, because you're looking at a confederate, and I call it an unholy alliance, that all of them they don't like Israel. They don't like Israel's dominance, their position, or anything else. And at some point, we know that they're going to be overwhelmed, but really overwhelmed. Now, based on true counts, though, it would take a few nations to overwhelm Israel, because Israel, they are the inventors of most of the technology the world is using right now. Credit to Israel. That's a fact. Cell phone invented by a woman in Israel. Some of these anti-missile systems and anti-missile systems developed by Israeli individuals. So you're looking at all this talent and all of the tech coming from Israel, right?
Yeah.
They have gadgets and some technology they will share with no one. In fact, when we ship them planes, they demand that the planes are gutted. Everything taken out. They put their own technology in there, and some of those capabilities have been shown here as of late, which is astounding, right?
Yep.
However, we know that by reading the Bible, somehow, some way, we know it starts politically, because they'll sit down and tell lies at one table. So you'll have discussion about the Middle East, but they will eventually be overwhelmed. Well, the naval force put over in the Middle East by Russia, that was purposed right after the Ukraine, right? Because that story with the Ukraine is not over. They are a very important piece, the Ukraine is. They will be overrun. Now, some of the tactical launch sites are right there in the Ukraine. Remember that. Some of the tactical launch sites are right there.
Well, we're also putting in now 6, United States is putting in 6 military bases in Poland. And we've just been able to talk to Ukraine. I guess Ukraine and Russia today signed an agreement to basically say, let's stop fighting. You know, we're keeping Russia's saying we're keeping Crimea. We'll get out of eastern Ukraine. We'll give you a lower price on gas and oil. Let's stop fighting. We're not getting anywhere with this. Let's move on. We got bigger fish to fry. I mean, there's some stuff going on right now, isn't there?
It is, and it's tentative. The problem with some of this discussion, it's tentative. Yeah. It's not set in stone. You'll find that some of the agreements that were made last month are broken this month, right? Yep. Everybody has already fallen out of the nuclear agreement that kept submarines from carrying nuclear missiles, right? But that's over with. Now the nuclear missiles, because you can follow nuclear weapons all over the earth, they've been put back in the submarines again, and we have done likewise. So we are in a situation of fix, and it would be nice if cooler heads would prevail, Pastor Paul, but given certain things that are affecting the mental faculties of everybody, I just don't see that they'll now.
I'm going to ask you for a prediction. With all these nukes that are floating around, they're on missiles, they're on the back of trucks, they're in silos. We got people in charge of countries right now that are absolutely hell-bent on the apocalypse. We got an American government right now that is at each other's throats. They want to kill each other. It's horrible. Give me a prediction, Mike. When is the first nuke blow up in a city in the world? How much time till that first nuke explodes somewhere?
Well, I can give you a guesstimate, which is just a best guess at this thing, but given the lack of constraint of leadership, and given some people who are now standing against their own governmental powers, with all these nuclear missiles floating around, there's going to be an accident. There's going to be somebody somewhere. There's going to be a breach somewhere. And cyber, the cyber threats and war that's happening right now is off the charts. It is off the charts. It has affected just about everybody in America, whether they realize that or not. It is off the charts. But I would say, given the when they stopped that agreement, that really turned everything over. So some of the older books are coming back. Some of the older tacticians have been called back to see, well, what's going to happen if this takes place? We're talking about nuclear tacticians, right? They've been called back.
Right.
Why? Because they are the experts on how to counter things inside of a nuclear conflict. But I would say, given the explosiveness of those folks overseas, and they are determined, their citizens are determined to carry out massive assaults against Israel. It's one thing to have a government say, it's another to have an entire country stand behind it, and then it's another to have another superpower back those who have sworn to do it. All right, that's a bad situation all the way around. I would say we're looking at something pretty soon. We're looking at something pretty soon. The tensions are rising incredibly fast. And if America is blindsided during that time, that's what we're going to see. You know, I'll make this prediction. I'll say this. When we, the United States of America, following something that happens in the UK and something that happens in Europe, during that time, after something happens in the UK and something happens in Europe, during that time, America will sit in a position and be caught off guard. We're going to have our guard down when that takes place. We will not be in a defensive posture. We're going to be suckered into something, and somebody's going to take full advantage of that. See, those in the Middle East, I hate to say this bluntly, but if you haven't noticed by now, it's a big pack of lies. That their politics are a big pack of lies. They do everything for an advantage of self. Everything they do. They're not thinking about anybody else but their own rule. They still have that Babylonian spirit covering them, that Persian spirit covering them, right? So they're thinking about rule and domination.
Right.
They're not thinking about everything else. They will appease whomever they have to get in position to rule over everybody, but they hate America.
Yes.
And we know that in prophecy. Somebody tied America up. We don't know who it is or what actually happened, but Israel's not going to be under that type of threat if America is around and if America has strength and power, right? So we're going to be target number one following the problem with the UK and Europe. The reason why I say UK and Europe is because they have a terrorist issue over there escalating right now, right? It's like a time bomb, and it will go off. And these guys are working in their nuclear facilities. These guys are working as doctors and lawyers and everything else. Pastor Paul, for an example, now just not to make anybody nervous, and I'm certainly not prejudiced. I don't think of people by way of race, right? I think of them by way of faith. Because if somebody does not believe in Christ, Satan can use that person anytime he gets ready.
Right, that's right.
But we have a lot of folks here that are loyal to Islam, but they just so happen to run just about all the gas pumps. Have you noticed that? And if they were to make a phone call or something like that and say, well, the gas pumps are broke, we're looking at an infrastructure through freedom, through peace in this country. We can be destroyed through our own articles that we have. These folks can manipulate them, get into position, and shut us down. Some way, somehow, we're going to have our hands tied. We're not going to be able to help Israel, and that's not a good thing. That's just not a good thing.
Right, and it sounds like that you believe that there's going to be a major catastrophe in Europe, in either the United Kingdom or in Europe, before there's one that even hits here. But you're sensing one's going to hit here also. We're number one, but it may be UK or Europe first, that the first tactical nuke blows up in a major city. And I will say that 2 years is a long time for us to keep that from happening. I really think, and I don't even know if Putin's in charge of Russia hardly anymore. I mean, he hasn't been in the Kremlin now for over 3.5 months. He's either stayed in Crimea or Sochi or sleeping on a couch in France with Emmanuel Macron. And he has protesters outside of the Kremlin walls, and he doesn't even go back to Moscow. Is he even in control? I've heard you say this before, there's a lot of people rolling around with a lot of footballs and codes to a lot of silos and missiles. I mean, this is getting to become, and we do too. We got people that we don't know we don't know who we can trust now. Can we really trust our ABC, some of our ABC agencies?
We don't. We really don't. It's just like a couple of years ago. If it weren't for some of the fast-acting work from the NSA, some nuclear weapons would have been launched from the USA.
Yeah.
Because we're now having a lot of people who can't stand this country, and they're in leadership for our military.
I know.
But that brings up the artificial intelligence topic and why they put it in place so fast. Because they're going to, there's a predictive system they're going to put into play, which is why everybody's going to have to switch. The IDs are changing because they have to. We're going to be living in a predictive system regarding computer systems. That has to happen. They're not going to continue to go the route that we're going.
Yeah, so you're calling that like a Minority Report kind of thing. They're going to have to, things are going to have to be set in place in a predictive way. AI is going to have to run things.
Well, and it does a good job now, because if you look at some of the less conspicuous things, like some of your convenience stores and online ads and everything else, they have predicted the personalities of just about everybody in the USA, and especially those on Facebook or any type of social media. Those people contribute to the testing of AI systems, and now they have awareness. They have AI aware systems now, which means they not only track your behavior, but they learn your behavior. Right? They can predict your behavior with a pretty high degree of accuracy. It's already in operation. It's just that it's not looked at that way. It's already working. It's already in place. It's there. It's just that they have not unleashed it yet. So it can predict what you're more likely to do, given the weather, given the day, given your mood and everything else, right? Because people are readily contributing to the R&D of such things through social media. And that was one of the missing elements that the scientists spoke of in the 1970s at MIT. They said we need personality profiles on everybody to go ahead and fine-tune the system so we can have that predictive system.
Folks, Mike from around the world with us. Wow, what a great program this is, Mike. I'd like for you to come back again. I'm traveling the next couple of weeks. Can you come back on Thursday night, the 24th of October, if we're still here?
Yeah, I think so. I think that October period after the 16th is clear for me. So I don't see that. I can do that. I don't see that as a problem.
All right. So we're going to book it right there. Let's see. And wait a minute. Let me make sure it's the right date. Today's the 3rd, right? So it'll be 10, 70. Yeah. So October 24th, Mike from around the world will be back with us in 3 weeks. A lot can happen in 3 weeks, Mike. Be ready.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, it can.
Thank you for coming on, being with us, Dave. It's a great interview. Thank you so much for being candid and open.
God bless you, Pastor Paul.